Hello, everybody. Welcome into GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Hope everybody had a great weekend. Today is Monday, May 12th. Today, I am joined by a very special guest, Marab, the host of the GSMC Basketball Podcast here. We're going to be talking a lot of action together. We're going to go over the NBA Draft Lottery later on. We're going to go over the games from this weekend. We're going to talk about the Knicks. We're going to talk about the Pacers. We're going to talk about the Warriors and the Nuggets, all of that coming up in just a second. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful May 12th. But like I was saying, we do have Marab here. Marab, how are you doing today?
Doing awesome, Jeremy. Thank you for having me today.
Of course, anytime. But we're going to start off here our show today going over a little bit of the content from the Eastern Conference of the NBA playoffs. So we're going to start off with the New York Knicks taking on the Boston Celtics. This series has been insane. Obviously, the Knicks take game 1 and game 2, which led to a lot of questions specifically for Jason Tatum and that Boston Celtics team. But the Celtics, they answer big in the Garden game 3, a game that they had to win. What does this mean for this series? And the big question for me, Marab, who's really in control here? Is it the Celtics? Is it the Knicks with that 2-1 lead? What's going on in this series right now?
Yeah, you previewed it awesomely. This is a crazy series, top down. If you're talking about depth, you can talk about the Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown effect. Your first question, absolutely. I think the Knicks are in control of the series right now. Their grit is showing immensely throughout this series. We saw them go into Boston and knock off the defending champs not once but twice, continuing their undefeated streak on the road. Now there is a little bit of a question mark though. The Knicks are now 1-3 in MSG, and the Celtics have I think they have the best road record in the NBA. It's gonna be interesting to see how this all plays out because I seriously think tonight's game, whoever wins tonight's game, I think wins the series. If the Celtics win, they make it a 2-2 series, put all the pressure back on New York, going back to Boston, reclaiming home court advantage as well. And if the Knicks win, of course, they go up 3-1, and barring a Celtics miraculous comeback, they will move on to the Eastern Conference Finals. So tonight's game is crucial for both teams.
Yeah, no, tonight's game is huge. You have to remember that in the regular season, the Celtics swept the Knicks 4-0. Now, this isn't something that we have seen be a death sentence in the playoffs. Obviously, a similar thing happened last year when the Suns swept the Wolves, and then the first round, the Wolves ended up sweeping the Suns over there. Very different set of circumstances here, but there's still a little bit of a through line. That game, to me, that game 3, it felt like the Celtics took back control. And it's not like they didn't really have control of these series. They were up by 20 points in each of the first 2 games in this one, and then they just went away. They missed all their shots. They had shot 25%, 25 for 100, actually right on the dot there, making our percentage math easy. But 25% from 3 for the first 2 games of this series, and you get the feeling that's not going to last forever, right? That's not something that we are going to see out of this Celtics team the entire series. And again, that showed up big in game 3 in the Garden. Game 4 tonight, it's already kicked off a little bit. We're about 30 minutes into the game there, but what's the big key when we're talking about this game? Obviously, it's a must-win for both of these teams, I believe. If the Celtics even this series, the Knicks, honestly, I feel like are done in 6. I don't think they have the juice to compete with the Celtics team. Maybe I'm way off there, but if the Celtics fall 3-1, they could still come back, but it's going to be a heck of a lot harder. What's the key for the Celtics? What's the key for the Knicks in this game?
I think the key for the Knicks, let's start with the Knicks part because they're up 2-1 and they hold home court advantage. So let's start with them. I think it comes down to Jalen Brunson. we have really been missing that Jalen Brunson game in this series. I think in game one, he had 29 points. Game two, he had just over 20 points. He hasn't really had, even in that game one, he wasn't an efficient 29 points. He got hot in the fourth quarter, and that's it's been the story of this series, hitting clutch shots down the stretch, and obviously being labeled as the clutch player of the NBA this year. But we haven't really seen that 40-point game, for example, in game six against the Pistons. We haven't seen that explosion out of him. So I think if they can get him going early on, that would be crucial. We also saw in game two, Mikal Bridges turned it on late in that game in the second half. He was a big reason why the Knicks came back in game two to win that game. I think they need him. Mikal Bridges is really the X factor for this team. And then of course you'll have the rest of the guys like Cat, Karl Anthony Towns, and Josh Hart. But those two guys in particular are the two guys that I think the Knicks need to get going early on offensively.
Yeah,
For the Celtics side of things, sorry, you can
and
you
Jalen
go.
Brunson, you mentioned. Jalen Brunson has been, just to put it plainly, really bad in the first three quarters of each of these games. He turned it on down the stretch, like you mentioned, in game one and two. But if he does that again, if he does his disappearing act again, I don't think the Celtics are going to shoot their way out of a game again. But speaking of the Celtics, you were starting to get on what is the key for them. Obviously, shooting is one of them, but that's got to make your shots to win a game. What's the key for the Celtics to take game 4?
I think you know what I'm going to say, Jeremy. They need to knock down their shots. Game one and game two, they shot incredibly poorly. Game one, they had the NBA record for most missed threes in a game. Game three, they kind of turned it on a little bit. They shot a little bit more efficiently with 50% from three. Sorry about that. But I think you need to get these guys, they need to make their open shots. I think it's 48 threes they've shot in this series that have been wide open. And by wide open, I mean 6 feet or more between the player taking the shot and the defender. You need to hit that. You need to knock down those shots. Those are the easy ones.
Right.
So I think that's what it comes down to. I think it comes down to the play of Jason Tatum, and as well as some of those role players. We saw Peyton Pritchard go off in game three with 23 points. I think it's the shooting of the Celtics that can keep them in it. As long as they can shoot the ball decently, I think they'll be fine.
And that brings us back to what I think is the big question with this series in specific. Despite the Knicks being up 2-1, in my mind, it feels like the Celtics are in charge of this series. It feels like the Celtics are the one running the show, even in the games that they lost. It was an overtime loss where they led by 20. It was a 1-point loss where they led by 20. They just kind of let the game get away from them. Am I that far off base here, Marab, for thinking that the Celtics have been and still are in control of this series, regardless of what has happened thus far?
No, seriously, no. Game ones and game two, they held control of the game for 3 quarters. Each of 6 quarters, 6 out of the 8 quarters between game one and game two, they've held the lead by 20 plus points. In game three, they won the game by 20 plus points. They were up by 30 plus. They hold the keys to they hold the card. They hold the cards. They hold the cards to their own destiny. And it depends on how they shoot. If they can if they can make some little coaching adjustments, for example, with Joe Mazzulla not calling timeout in overtime in game one, not calling timeout in game two for the final possession with Jason Tatum. I think it's little adjustments. And yeah, that's all I can say really about it.
Yeah, going from little adjustments to a series that I think really needs some big adjustments. Let's talk a little bit about the Pacers here. The Indiana Pacers now up 3-1 on a team that dominated the regular season. Of course, there are still some reasons you can point to. Not having Darius Garland for game 1 and 2, not having Evan Mobley for game 2, not having Hunter for game 2. They all came back in game 3. They did what they needed to do, right? They got the guys out. They got a victory to keep this series seemingly close. But then last night happens. 80 points, a 41-point halftime deficit for the Cavs. And yes, they clawed their way back, but they also lost Donovan Mitchell at halftime. Big changes need to be made in this series as opposed to the Knicks Celtics series. Do the Cavs stand a chance at all, Marab?
I don't think so. I seriously think the health of the Cavs compromises them too much. I think, as well as Darius Garland has played, he had 21 points last night. Without Donovan Mitchell, this team is like they're like sitting ducks out there for the Indiana Pacers to pick off. And I don't mean to get on the Cleveland Cavaliers. Like you mentioned, they had the best record in the Eastern Conference. They went on to tear. They went on multiple 17-game win streaks, 15-plus game win streaks in the regular season. Multiple. They were absolutely one of the best teams in the NBA, the second best record. And to go from that, unfortunately, they just pulled a bad draw, I think, in this second round. This is a Pacers team that is so incredibly deep.
It's so deep.
That can go 7-man deep. 7-man deep that went double figures last night. You have Tyrese Halliburton that's running the show. And a little nugget of information, this is a Pacers team that went 3-1 against the Cavs in the regular season.
Right.
So I'm as much as it's shocking as what they've done, I think we're seeing the Pacers take that next step, a step that we didn't expect right now.
And getting a little bit more, obviously the Pacers got a deep run. They have that playoff experience. They have multiple guys on that roster that have won a championship before. This is a Pacers squad that, like you said, depth is the way they win. You have 4, 5 guys coming off the bench that can beat you in just about anything in any given game. The Cavs don't really stand a chance in my mind, but how real of a threat are the Pacers? We've kind of been, and us, I'm sure, I know I am guilty of this, kind of letting the Pacers fall a little bit to the back of the mindset a little bit. But how real of a championship contender are they? They made it to the championship, the Eastern Conference championships in last year's playoffs before getting swept by the Celtics in the hardest fought series the Celtics had to go through last postseason. The Celtics look a little weaker. Do the Pacers have a real chance of coming out of the East?
I really think so. I think they're the healthiest team in the East, and that's what's proving them to be the best team or putting them in this conversation. I seriously thought before the playoffs even started, they were the biggest threat to the Cavs or the Celtics to come out of the East. They were my dark horse pick, and they're proving that right now. Especially with the Celtics injuries to Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown's knee, Kristaps Porzingis, we've seen him struggle in the first 2 rounds of the playoffs. And how good the Pacers look. They're on an absolute tear. They're on a roll, and their momentum is the biggest reason. Their confidence, their momentum is a big reason why they're having success right now against the Cavs and throughout these playoffs. So, no, I would not be shocked if the Pacers came out of the Eastern Conference, and I think they have a legitimate shot to do so.
Yeah. Game 5 back in Cleveland over there, I believe, is in 2 days from now. But we're going to take a quick break here. Stick around. When we come back, we're going to turn our attention to the Western Conference. A little bit of a different feel over there in the West with one tight series and then another series that's just weird all around. But we'll be right back with that here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. 'Cause waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh, I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Is there any background noise coming through, by the way, Jeremy?
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished going over what's going on in the East. We, of course, today are joined by my co-host and host of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, Marab. In this segment, we're going to turn our attention to the Western Conference. The Western Conference really feels a lot different to me than the Eastern Conference does, but in a very unique kind of way. We'll get to that in a second, though. Before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with us here on a beautiful Monday, March 12th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into what's going on with the Western Conference as far as playoff goes. And we're going to start off with a battle of MVPs. You have Jokic and Shea, top two vote getters over there. Most likely Shea's going to win it. Jokic, of course, has won multiple MVPs in the past here, but this series has not been defined by them. They, in fact, have probably had their worst stretch of games, at least for Jokic, that I can remember in a very, very long time. And the same can be said for Shea. It's two very different conversations surrounding the two superstars right now. We're going to start with Jokic's conversation. People are saying that he's not the best in the world anymore, which, frankly, I think is ridiculous. You can't take a short-term slump and broadcast it for the rest of what he did this season. But I'm curious, is there a valid argument for that? Because there have been times this season where I've had that argument with myself of how long Jokic can sustain this best in the world level. What do you think?
I mean, we saw in game one, he absolutely showed up and showed out. Now, these last three games, I absolutely agree with you. He has had a little bit of a slump, but this is also a player that we saw in the regular season. He went on a tear for games in terms of 40-point games with 10 rebounds. It wasn't just points; it's rebounds, it's assists, averaging a triple-double. He still deserves to be in that best of the world conversation, no question in my mind, Jeremy. But this is a player that is. Honestly, these are two players in Shea and Jokic that are just under the microscope right now. These are two players that are being nitpicked for MVP right now in terms of the MVP race. Shea may be in the lead for that, but there's been a lot of controversy in who to pick. Is it Jokic? Is it Shea? Do you go with the best player in the world, or do you go with the best player on the best team in the league? Who do you go with? So that's the question that we're getting answered right now. And with Jokic's performance over the last three games, shooting 30% from the field, I think he's had 16 rebounds and 16 turnovers over the last three games in total. That's not typical Jokic numbers. And we know he can play better. We know game two was a little bit of an abnormality because of how the Thunder came right out of the gates and pretty much blew him out in the first quarter. And we knew how the game was going to transpire. But I think we give Jokic a little bit of a break. Let him show up in game five. Let us see how he does in these next three games, because I think this series absolutely goes 7 games.
Yeah, the way that it's looking right now, it seems neither of these teams can really gather a foothold. And I think pretty plain to see neither of these teams are playing their best basketball. We've seen stretches where both of these teams have played really good, both of these teams have played really bad. The big concern with me is more with the Thunder and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander than it is with the Nuggets. With the Nuggets, you know what you're getting, right? It's Jokic's team. If Jokic has a bad night, they're probably going to have a bad night, right? That's what you get out of the Nuggets. What you don't know with the Thunder is how do they work in a tight game situation. For how good they've been, they are a young team that has not had to deal with a lot of adversity at all this season. They've been the number 1 seed in the West now 2 years in a row. Last year, of course, they lose to a team that eventually made it to the finals in the Mavericks in round 2. It's starting to feel like a very similar series to that one. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander needs to step up. Does he get a little bit of that playoff choker label? Is that something that's going to start to develop around Shea? What do you think?
It's such a tough conversation, Jeremy, because this is a team in the Thunder that I really look at, and they're such a young team. That's the biggest thing with them. They're young. They're gaining experience right now. We saw them last year. I think was it 2-2 as well at this time of year as well against the Mavs?
Yeah, 2-2 as well.
2-2 as well. So this is a team in the Thunder that are finding themselves in a similar position. I think Shea, if he wants to get out of that playoff choker narrative, if you want to call it that, I think he needs to perform over these next 3 games. He needs to show up and he needs to show out. We haven't really seen that Shea 40-point game that we saw in the regular season. I think the most he's had so far in the playoffs is 34 or 37. I think in game 2 he had 34. So we haven't really seen that explosion out of him yet, that him taking that next step. Now, there is another part of this conversation, though. This is a team in the Thunder that are incredibly deep. They're incredibly young, but they don't have a legit number 2 option with Shea. Jalen Williams, we love him. We know he's growing into that role. But we saw in game 4, he only had 10 points. We know Jalen Williams can play better, but 2 for 13 from the field, we know he can play better than that, and we need him to step up into that role. If you're the Thunder, you need him to step up. If the Thunder are going to win this series, he needs to. Shea needs to. The whole team needs to, because Jokic is going to show up in Game 5. That Game 5 is going to be crucial in terms of who's going to take momentum in a best-of-3 series now. So if it's a time to do it, it's Game 5. And then, of course, from there, if you lose or if you win.
Right, for sure. And that statistic that's always thrown around there in a 7-game series, when it's tied at 2, the winner of game 5 wins 80% of those series. It's a tried and true thing. It's tough to win 2 straight in a playoff atmosphere, especially when you're going to have to take one on the road. The main thing with the Thunder is they're very deep. They don't have that second scorer, like you said, but this is something that we've seen Shea struggle with in the past. Does this open up the door potentially, and this is a little bit deeper into the offseason kind of real deep dive conversation, but we've seen a lot of rumors around Giannis come up today. Of course, there was the story posted by ESPN that maybe he might potentially want out of Milwaukee, which is a non-story, right? That doesn't mean anything. We already kind of knew that there's a chance he wanted out, but now it feels a little bit more official that he might not stay in Milwaukee long term. The Thunder have the resources to pay for him, but it would be expensive. I assume that they wouldn't give up Shea. Outside of him, you can break up that young core a bit. Does a second-round exit for the Thunder guarantee that they make a massive move like that in the offseason, or do you think they feel comfortable running it back one more time with this young core?
The question is, do you have to give up? You might have to give up a couple players, like a 1 or 2 off the bench. But I think the Thunder literally have assets in their draft capital alone. I think how many first round picks do they have, Jeremy? They have over 20, right? In the next 4 years.
They've got way too many. Way too many.
They have too many. Too many. And that is the draft capital that a team like Milwaukee needs. They need youth. They need to continue. They need to rebuild this team. You see Damian Lillard. He's kind of growing up into he's just tore his Achilles. He's going to be 36 next year. Giannis is entering his prime. He's in his prime right now, and he wants to just be competitive in the playoffs. This is a Bucks team that has lost in the first round 3 years in a row. They haven't made it to the conference finals since they won it in 2021, since they won the NBA championship. So it's going to be interesting to see how this offseason plays out. But in terms of who can offer Milwaukee the best package for a Giannis, I think the Thunder are either 1 or 2. And I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I can't really think of another one. Maybe San Antonio, but I don't think San Antonio would even give up their best guys. I think the Thunder may have the best package for Milwaukee to give for Giannis's talents.
Right. The big question is how set are they in this core? And I think this playoff series is gonna play a huge part in whether or not they decide to make a massive move like that. The Thunder, shout out to Sam Presti there for even having this many assets at a point where you've been the best team in the West 2 years in a row. and have the MVP on your roster. So that's incredibly impressive. But the Thunder, I think this is a huge series, not just for this season and their guys, but also for the direction of their franchise. Outside of that, the other series that's taking place in the Western Conference is one that was supposed to be a lot closer than it feels right now. The Wolves and the Warriors going over there. The big story, of course, no Steph Curry. Steph Curry not coming back until probably game 6. When it was first reported, I was thinking there's a chance he comes back in game 5. The Wolves are aware of it. Of course, we saw that Anthony Edwards clip with him having a chat over there with Gary Payton Jr. in game. But can the Warriors survive until Chef Curry comes back? What's going on with them? Because they were able to keep it close. It felt like the game that they played this weekend, they needed that win, and they just kind of collapsed down there, or the Wolves started hitting their shots, I guess. Do the Warriors have even a shot of making it to a potential Curry return?
Well, Jeremy, if they want a shot, they need to win tonight. Game 4, if they can tie this series up to 2-2, going back to Minnesota, it would change the entire complexion of this series. Similar to how Boston and New York is right now. In a different way, but of course, you're just trying to get Steph Curry out on the floor. Give him an opportunity. Just give him a chance to bring this team back. If you can force a game 6, if you can give him that extra game of rest in game 5, I think they have a chance, but they need to win tonight. You had 3 chances, game 2, game 3, and game 4. Game 2, you were pretty much shot out of the water. Minnesota losing game 1 in pretty dramatic fashion. You knew they were going to come out like they were shot out of a cannon. So I'm not shocked that they won game 2.
Mm-hmm.
Game 3, we saw that meltdown down the stretch. We saw playoff Jimmy show up, giving them 33 points. We saw Jonathan Kuminga show up. But I think the key guy that you need to show up, as tough as this sounds, and this is a lot to ask, but we've seen Buddy Hield show up in game 7 against the Rockets. We saw him show up in game 1 against the Timberwolves. These last 2 games, he hasn't really shown up. And he's honestly, if there is an X factor for the Warriors, I think it's Buddy Hield to get his shot going early on. If he can show up the way he did in those other 2 games, I think the Warriors have a realistic chance to tie this series tonight at 2 games apiece. But they need to do it if they want Steph Curry to come back and give themselves an opportunity to win this series down the stretch.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. They need a big Buddy Hield game, but that's a tough thing to rely on. The other thing I would say that they need, and this is the obvious one, you need Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler needs to play like he did in game 3. But the other one that I think kind of can fly under the radar, and something that I didn't appreciate enough, is how important Draymond Green is to this team. He, of course, is the heart and soul of this Warriors squad. Draymond Green is the guy that they could not keep going without. You talk about how good Steph Curry is. This is still the same Warriors team as long as Draymond is on it, if I'm being honest, right? They need Steph Curry for it to still be the same dynasty. But the defensive engine and the fact that the offense just kind of rolls through Draymond, he's not going to be the most effective shooter. He doesn't need to be, but if he plays like he did in game 1, if he's able to hit a couple of those jump shots, that changes the entire defensive strategy and the entire outlook for this series. I think you do need a Buddy Hield game, but if Draymond Green is able to step up, if he's able to stay out of foul trouble and he's able to just be the leader of this team like he needs to be, that's something else that I think could really help the Warriors in this one against the Timberwolves. But as far as the Timberwolves go, they just need to keep playing their game. They've kind of struggled a little bit getting points against the number 1 ranked defense since Jimmy Butler came over in that Warriors defense. But they just need to start hitting their shots. They've kind of struggled. They really struggled early on in this series. But they've started to come back up. Anthony Edwards playing really good basketball. Is there, again, if everything goes right for the Warriors, there's still a shot that the Wolves can win this just because Anthony Edwards can outduel everybody on that team. What's your prediction for this game tonight?
It's a tough prediction. It is really so tough. I think, let me say this, whoever wins this game wins this between maximum of 5-point margin. I don't think this is going to be nowhere near a blowout. So I think this is going to be a very close game. Whoever wins, I really think the Warriors can squeak it out. I think we see a monstrous Jimmy Butler game. We haven't really seen the playoff Jimmy that we've seen great 30-point games, but we haven't seen the 40-point. We haven't seen his days from Miami where he would just show up and take over games. For example, game 6 against Boston when they were down 3-2 in that series a couple of years ago, when he went off for 45 points in Boston. He is a little bit older now, but that is the Jimmy Butler that we know can show up in playoff games. When you need him most, he shows up. And this is his time to shine. You don't need him to. It won't really bother his legacy. He'll still be playoff Jimmy. But this is the time when you need him. You need him to show up in these moments. And if they can get a Draymond Green to show up and knock those threes, like you said, in game 1, he was crucial in that game 1. Buddy Hield, if he can show up, I think it's going to be I honestly think tonight could be the Anthony Edwards Jimmy Butler duel. I really think so. I think this is going to be such a great game tonight.
And I think that's what it's going to have to be. I think I'm taking the Wolves in this one. I don't think Buddy Hield can keep it going. He had 2 really good games, but there's the Buddy Hield cycle, right? Why is this guy slept on so much, and then he stinks it up for a little while, and we're coming back down on the Buddy Hield side of it. So I'm just not so confident in what's going on here. But outside of that, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, lottery. The NBA lottery was just before we went live, and there was a shocker in this one. The Dallas Mavericks, with 1.8% odds, have taken the number 1 overall pick and the right to draft Cooper Flagg. We'll talk about that coming up next here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished going over the Eastern and Western Conference battles in the semifinals of each of those respective conferences in the NBA. In this segment, we turn our attention over to the NBA draft lottery. Craziness. The sky is falling down. Nico Harrison and the Dallas Mavericks have secured the number 1 overall pick and the rights to draft one Cooper Flagg out of Duke, a supremely talented player that can come in and immediately replace what was Luka Doncic. I'm still here with Marab, but before we get into that conversation, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those 2 things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, May 12th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into the craziness that was the NBA draft lottery. Of course, Christmas over there for some teams, not a good day for others. And we're going to start off with the miracle 1.8% odds for the Mavericks to get the number one overall pick. Is it rigged? It's not rigged, but there's certainly a little bit of suspicion there with the Mavericks getting it and all of the hate towards Nico Harrison. What do you make of this? The Mavericks getting Cooper Flagg. What does this mean for them? Can they turn it back around and be something special with Anthony Davis and Cooper Flagg now?
Jeremy, is there any way that they don't draft Cooper Flagg?
No, not a shot they don't draft Cooper Flagg. Look, I love Dylan Harper, all right? I think he's a great talent, and I think in just about any other draft class, he would go number one. But Cooper Flagg has been the prince that was promised, the next great American prospect, right? He was with the gold medal winning Olympic team from the 2024 Paris Olympics, and apparently he was cooking them. So he's already ready. He was the best player in college basketball last season. He frontlined a Duke squad that was the third best team by net rankings in the history of the NCAA tournament. This is a crazy player, and it's just more insane that after everything that Mavs fans have gone through, they get rewarded with this.
Yeah, 1,000%, 100% agree with you. This is Christmas. This is Christmas if you're a Dallas Mavericks fan. This is you going through a breakup, and then your parents cook you your grandma cooks you your favorite meal. Absolutely trying to cheer you up. This is what it smells like. That it really does. And regardless of what it might be, the Mavs have landed Cooper Flagg. 99.99% sure. This is now going to be a Mavericks team. Let's just preview the lineup, because this is going to be a crazy lineup that can probably stack up with the top 5 of the Western Conference. And the Western Conference is already crazy. Kyrie at the point guard. You have whoever you want to plug in at the 2. I don't even know who to plug. Let's just say Cooper Flagg at the 2, which is not going to happen. Let's just say that. Say you put PJ Washington, Daniel Gafford, and then Anthony Davis as a starting 5. It's probably not going to happen, but I wouldn't be shocked if they put in that lineup as a big 5 from time to time.
That's dangerous.
This Mavericks team is going to be one of the best teams in the West, and they're going to be one of the best teams in the NBA. The Mavericks have gone from a Luka-less franchise that felt like they lost all their magic to it feels like they went from exactly what Nico Harrison said. We want to focus. Defense wins championships. It really feels like they flipped that ideology into reality. Whether that's going to work out in their favor, that's yet to be seen. But I think this Mavericks franchise has a legitimate chance to stack up with the Western Conference because of how just they hold a different X factor than probably any other team, maybe outside of the Nuggets. I can't see a team out rebounding them and being so dominant in the paint. And that's just my take on it.
Yeah, no, you're right. There's not a shot that another team with the bigs they have, especially if they find a way to work in like a 3 big lineup, we're talking Anthony Davis, Cooper Flagg, and Derek Lively or Daniel Gafford, whichever one. And then you get Kyrie when he's healthy, so he's going to miss most of the season. But you see the vision. This is the thing with that Luka trade, right? In a bubble, in a vacuum where it is a 1-year deal and then everything resets, it honestly wasn't the worst, right? But you have to project for the future, right? You have to project that Luka's going to have 10 more years of his prime than Anthony Davis is at this point. You've built an old team. You've just shortened your timeline after making the finals in one season. This is huge for them. Cooper Flagg instantly resets that timeline, and you get Anthony Davis. Holding on to Nico Harrison, and this move might go down as one of the craziest 180s in NBA history. It's still not going to make it a good trade, but revisionist history could make it seem that, oh, at the end of the day, he made the right decision, depending on the success Luka has over there in that LA market, or how long he's even over there in that LA market. But outside the Mavericks, which 1.8% is the fourth lowest odds in the history of the draft lottery to ever get that number one overall pick, there were a couple other surprises as well. The three teams that were tied at 14% to get that number one overall pick are picking 4, 5, 6 in the Hornets, Jazz, and Wizards, while the Spurs get that number two overall pick. The Spurs, of course, most likely going to draft Dylan Harper out of Rutgers. He is someone that I think in most drafts would be a first overall pick. This is a really good spot for them as well. You get to pair him and De'Aaron Fox in that backcourt, which I think they both play a very similar style of basketball. So I'm curious how that fit works. But you put him with Wemby, that's about as good as you can possibly get. The other opportunity, and we kind of touched on it a little bit in the last segment we talked about, they could trade this number two overall pick for, along with some other things, for a guy like Giannis. And the Bucks immediately reset. The Spurs make one of the scariest front courts, in the history of the NBA with Wemby and Giannis right there. And that works out for everybody. The Spurs wouldn't have to give up too much, and the Bucks get an immediate reset of the franchise. Is that more likely than them drafting at number two?
Honestly, there's a world. I seriously think the way if you had Giannis and Victor Wembanyama on the same team, I think if you're the GM of the Spurs, you jump at that opportunity. It not only gives Wemby a chance to take a step back and grow under a guy like Giannis, but it instantly puts Giannis back on a competitive team for a chance to compete for an NBA championship. The Western Conference is continuing to stack up. If it continues to grow the way it's looking, the way it's forecasted, we could be in a crazy Western Conference for years to come here. So I think there is a legit chance that the Spurs go after this, especially with how competitive the Western Conference is. Do you want to be 3 years down the line, you could be really good, or do you want to be immediately really good?
Right.
That's just how I look at it.
The West is already a lot more packed than the East is, and this is not going to make it any better. At the third pick, the 76ers hold on to their draft pick, which is huge for them. Of course, it's been a nightmare season. Injuries up and down that roster, promising rookies, vets that they brought in. Paul George, they signed that massive contract. I still think he can maybe bounce back after what was the worst possible season he could have had. Joel Embiid just needs to stay healthy. Tyrese Maxey needs to stay healthy. You're going to get Jared McCain back, who looked amazing in his limited action, along with the number 3 overall pick. The Sixers are building something over there. What are the odds that they make a run at the East next season? Again, the big question with them is health, but assume health. Where do they rank in the East right now?
I would probably put them somewhere around 4 or 5. I think the top 3 of the East is pretty set up with the Celtics, Cavs, Pacers, however you want to slice it with those 3. But I think they could be in the conversation with the Knicks, Pistons, Magic. You could throw the Sixers in that conversation, absolutely. And I really think that the Sixers could be really good. If they can stay healthy, if they can get Joel Embiid, who was the MVP of the NBA a couple years ago, a healthy Paul George, a healthy Tyrese Maxey, and absolutely the way you talked about Jared McCain is 1,000%. He's going to be one of the best young talent. He's one of the best young prospects in the NBA right now, probably one of the more underrated ones. So if you can add another piece, the question is, what does this team really need? Do they need a small forward? I'm not 100% sure what this team needs. Maybe another big man. I think maybe even a power forward could be really good for this team. What do you think about it?
Yeah, there's a lot of ways they could go. Obviously, they don't need a center with Embiid there. The backcourt's a little crowded, right? You get McCain back. You have Tyrese Maxey. You got a couple guys. Quentin Grimes, if he ends up re-signing there, could have a little bit of a future. I think the best move for them is either a 3 or a 4. It depends if you think Paul George is going to be able to rebound and be what you are paying him for, right? If you think Paul George is going to be able to return, play, let's say the 3, because he can kind of play both of those positions, then you draft a 4. If not, I mean, I still think you draft that forwards, either smaller power forward over there. But a lot of the key for the 76ers offseason and who they sign is going to be based on their belief in Paul George, which they're stuck with now. Nobody is going to trade for that contract. I think they go that way. There's a lot of good prospects in this year's draft. It's a very deep class. It's a good draft to have number 3 overall. So I don't really think they can go wrong. Again, there's always the possibility they trade it, but I doubt that. They get their pick, which if they were outside the top 6, they wouldn't have, and it would go to the Thunder. And the Thunder would once again just continue to stockpile those picks. But outside of that top 3, the final spot in the top 4 went to the Hornets. Then we got the Jazz and the Wizards. The Pelicans at 7, the Nets at 8, Raptors at 9. The Houston Rockets are up in the top 10. Any of those teams in the top 10 you think got the biggest screw job or you think benefited the most here that we haven't covered yet?
I think a team that you kind of have, I think a team that if they can get healthy, if they can put the pieces, if they can get all their ducks in order, I think the Hornets could be one of the better teams in the Eastern Conference. I think they could be one of those surprise teams. If they can get LaMelo Ball back, if they can, it's going to be interesting to see what they do with Miles Bridges. Do they pay him? Do they trade him? Regardless of what they do, if they can figure that out, if they can draft a good player with that number 4 pick, if they can draft probably a shooting guard or a small forward to couple with LaMelo Ball, I think they could be really good. I really think so. In terms of screw job, I think that label probably goes to 2 teams in the Utah Jazz or the Washington Wizards. 2 teams that are just not really figuring it out offense or in general, like on both sides of the ball, in the front office. They have a lot of problems across the board, and I think that's a topic for another day. But yeah, I'd probably say the Wizards, honestly, would probably be the team that I feel the worst for, because they're a team that you expected to probably get one of those top 3 picks, and they miss out on that, even though they're still in the top 6 in a deep draft. You expect better if you're a Wizards fan and you struggled the way you did in the regular season.
Yeah, the Wizards are a weird team for sure. I like what you bring up there. Obviously, falling past that number 2 spot, I think immensely hurts the Wizards. I think if they get one of the top 2 picks, they're the Pistons of next year. You have a lot of promising young talent on that Wizards team, and despite them only winning 18 games, they were close, especially down the stretch in a lot of them. So this is a Wizards team that I think is a lot closer than a lot of people think, but being sent down to number 6 as opposed to picking in the top 3, I think completely kills their chance for next season, at least of making a Pistons-esque run. The Spurs, outside of the number 2 pick, get the last pick in the lottery now. They have 2 picks in the top 50. They've got 2 picks in the top 14. They get the 14 and the 2. They're the only team right now with 2 picks in the lottery. Kind of goes back to that Giannis situation. The Bucks, I think the Spurs are starting to gain a little bit of momentum, especially after tonight. But regardless of that, the NBA draft lottery has come and gone. Thank you, Marab, for spending your night with us tonight. I really do appreciate it. Everybody, go check out the GSMC Basketball Podcast if you want more of Marab here. Does great work over there. We're going to take a quick break. Have a good night.
Thank you, Dan.
When we come back, we're talking Derek Carr. You've been listening to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, May 12th. If you were just tuning in, you just finished going over everything you're going to need to know about the world of basketball, the East and Western Conference playoff series, and of course the NBA draft lottery that saw the Dallas Mavericks get the number 1 overall pick and an instant replacement to Luka Doncic. In this segment, we turn our attention to the NFL as the big surprise move of the offseason, I think, just took place. We had Carr retire. That is insane. Derek Carr, no longer a member of the NFL after what I would call a very successful career. We'll talk about that coming up in just a second. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, May 12th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into everything you need to know about Derek Carr and his retirement. Derek Carr, a legend for the Raiders, had his career kind of cut short by injury. Of course, the one that is bothering him right now, that shoulder injury that he was going to need surgery on, most likely holding him out for the rest of this season. Instead, now the Saints turn to Tyler Shuck, second-round rookie out of Louisville, who will most likely be the starting quarterback. We saw a little bit of a tryout from Jake Haener and from Spencer Rattler last season for the Saints. They weren't really the answer. Derek Carr was never really the answer either, and I think him retiring is a gift to this Saints organization. This is a Saints organization that has been in just the worst cap situation out of any team ever since Drew Brees retired, really. They've been pushing the bill later and later into the future, but at some point you always have to pay the piper, right? You always have to pay up at some point, regardless of how far you push it into the future. The money's going to come back at you. Derek Carr turns down $30 million to retire, which if he was still there, if he played next season, he would have been owed $69 million, which is huge, but he doesn't need the $30 million. He's already made over $200 million over his career with the Raiders and the Saints. He is someone that I'm really curious how he's going to be remembered because he came in with a bang. He was a guy that was leading the Raiders to the best record in the NFL, in the West, in the AFC, I should say, before breaking his leg. He was in MVP conversations before breaking his leg. And then injuries, he just never really got over it. He was a little more antsy in the pocket after breaking his leg, and who can blame him? You break your leg, you have, of course, not the greatest offensive lines, and then his career starts to go downhill. He was never bad, but he was never really that same MVP-level quarterback that we saw when he was in Oakland playing for the Raiders. That time comes to an end. It's a shame. I wish Derek Carr all the best because he is a supremely talented guy. He seems like a really great guy from all the interactions I've seen with the media. It's just a shocker that Derek Carr no longer in the NFL, but a blessing in disguise for the Saints. I truly do believe. A lot of Saints fans happy that he's gone. He was going to be a lot of money. But you still need to figure it out. You have a new regime now. You have a new GM. You have the same GM, a new head coach. They need to be able to turn it around immediately. Not immediately, I should say, because I hope they should have more patience with a guy like Kellen Moore, that you hire a young offensive-minded guy, but now he gets to build in his image. I think Tyler Shuck is a great start for him. He's a guy that has a lot of playing experience. He, of course, the big knock on him heading into the NFL draft was his age. He's got a lot more experience. He's dealt with some injuries, but still, I think as kind of a bridge quarterback, as much as you don't want to be a bridge quarterback, Tyler Shuck is cheaper than Derek Carr, and I think he might even have a higher ceiling than Derek Carr. We don't know what the Saints team is going to do, but there's a real chance they're bad this season. There's a real chance they're in that sweepstakes for the quarterback of this draft, whether that be Garrett Nussmeier out of LSU or that be Arch Manning if he decides to come out of Texas, which I doubt he is this season. The Manning family has been pretty adamant about him playing 2 full seasons in college football, but we'll see how that goes. Money can kind of change things in the NFL, but outside of that, this is just shocking news to me. Derek Carr being done in the NFL, it's not something that I expected. We will have to see exactly how this affects the Saints later on. But I would love to hear your thoughts. What do you think about Derek Carr coming? What do you think about his career? Obviously, he's not a Hall of Famer, but where in the grand scheme, at least in tiers of quarterbacks, will he land? He's kind of a lot higher on a lot of lists than you think. He's on the top 20 for just about every major passing stat. A lot of that, of course, because of where and when he played, but still, I'm curious how you think he'll be remembered, because he's not going to be remembered as a great, no doubt about it, but there is a chance he is remembered as a quarterback of this era, and I'm very curious what the future will think of Derek Carr. But we're going to take a quick break. And thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in to today's episode of GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I have been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. We'll be back tomorrow. Tomorrow, we will have another guest, another host from GSMC here on with us. Can't wait for you all to hang out with him and me, and I'll see you then. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet. Damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to